A nation of 500,000 people just held the European champions to a scoreless draw. A global superstar looked a FIFA reporter in the eye and refused to talk and offered to pay the fine on the spot. A national team is sleeping in one country and playing in another, crossing a border every single match day. And FIFA's own discrimination monitor demanded a tournament official be sent home, only for FIFA to clear him within 24 hours. This is week 1 of the 2026 World Cup, and it's not the football that's making headlines, it's FIFA. Before a single ball was kicked, FIFA had a story it wanted the world to believe. 48 teams, 16 more than ever before, 3 host nations, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, sharing the tournament for the first time in history. FIFA called it the most inclusive World Cup ever built. President Gianni Infantino's mantra, repeated for years in press conferences and promotional material, was simple: football unites the world. More countries, more fans, more stories. A tournament designed, according to FIFA's own language, to bring the planet closer together. That was the pitch. 5 days into the actual tournament, the pitch is being tested, and in several places, it's failing. Let's start with the result that stopped the football world in its tracks. On June 15th, Spain, the reigning European champions, ranked among the top 3 teams on the planet, walked onto the field in Atlanta for their opening group match. Their opponent? Cape Verde, a nation of islands in the Atlantic Ocean, a population of roughly 560,000 people, playing in only their second World Cup appearance ever. The result? 0-0. Spain could not score. Cape Verde's goalkeeper made save after save. Their backline held for 90 minutes against players who, individually, are worth more than Cape Verde's entire football economy. That result alone would be a footnote, a classic underdog story, the kind World Cups produce every 4 years. But it's not happening in isolation. It's happening alongside 5 other moments, each one different, each one a separate signal that something underneath this tournament is straining. Let's go to New Jersey, June 13th, Brazil versus Morocco. Brazil, 5-time World Cup winners, go down 1-0 early to a goal from Ismail Saibari. Frustration builds. And then, in the 32nd minute, Vinicius Jr. cuts inside from the left and strikes the ball past goalkeeper Bono, Brazil's equalizer, his second career World Cup goal. At halftime, FIFA's broadcast protocol requires teams to provide either a designated player or the head coach for a quick interview, a mandatory media obligation built directly into the broadcast contracts that generate FIFA's television revenue. Vinicius refused. A reporter told him, "FIFA will fine you." Vinicius replied, "We will pay the fine, but we will not give any interviews." Not, "I don't feel like it today," not an excuse, a direct, calculated statement. We know the cost and we're paying it anyway. It didn't stop there. Later, during a separate post-match interview, a Venezuelan reporter asked Vinicius a question in Spanish. He responded that as he was representing Brazil, he would answer in Portuguese instead, Wikipedia. And this wasn't an isolated friction point around language. In the same set of matches, a FIFA official blocked the Mexican journalist from asking Morocco's Akram Hakimi a question in Spanish, despite Hakimi being fluent, having been born and raised in Madrid. The official told the room, excuse me, you can only ask questions in the languages we have set. No, we can't do it because of the translation." Hakimi, visibly willing to answer in Spanish anyway, ended up responding in English at the official's request, Malaymail. The clip went viral, and FIFA noticed. Within a day, FIFA changed its press conference translation rules, a rare, fast, public reversal, triggered not by an internal review, but by 2 separate viral moments involving the same set of matches, Malaymail. One of the most famous athletes on the planet calculated that a fine was worth more than compliance. That's not noise. That's a message sent directly to the organization that profits from his image. Now back to that scoreless draw, because there's a layer to it that goes beyond the scoreline. FIFA's expanded 48-team format was sold as a gift to smaller football nations. More teams means more nations get the experience, the exposure, the revenue. But expansion comes with a cost that smaller federations are absorbing differently than giants like Spain or Brazil. This tournament spans 3 countries and 16 cities. Teams aren't just playing matches, they're managing extraordinary travel logistics, time zone shifts, and accommodation arrangements, often in locations chosen by organizers rather than the federations themselves. Spain's preparation base for this tournament, a boarding school in Tennessee. Iraq's base, a rural town in West Virginia. For a federation like Spain's, with deep financial resources, large medical and logistics staff, decades of major tournament experience, these inconveniences are an inconvenience. For a federation like Cape Verde's, with a fraction of that infrastructure, the same disruptions are a genuine competitive threat. That Cape Verde held Spain scoreless under those exact conditions says something remarkable about their preparation. It also raises an uncomfortable question for FIFA. How many of the more nations, more stories benefits of expansion are actually offset by a format that quietly punishes the nations with the least institutional muscle to absorb its logistical weight? If Cape Verde's revolt is structural and quiet, Iran's is loud, sustained, and the most extraordinary of the entire tournament. This didn't start during the tournament. It started months earlier. In December, Iran's Football Federation boycotted the official World Cup draw ceremony in Washington, D.C., after the U.S. denied visas to senior delegation members, including Federation President Mehdi Taj. The U.S. granted only 4 visas for the entire delegation, including one for the head coach, while denying Taj's application specifically. Federation spokesperson Amir Mehdi Alabi called the decision non-sporting and confirmed that FIFA, including President Infantino personally, had been formally notified. That was December. The tension never resolved. It escalated. By June, with Iran's domestic league shut down by an active war and most of the squad without competitive football since February, the team was forced to abandon its planned training base in Tucson, Arizona, and relocate entirely to Tijuana, Mexico, crossing the border into the United States on match days only. And then, just before their opening match against New Zealand, Iran's federation announced that FIFA had revoked their entire fan ticket allocation, typically 8% of stadium capacity, amounting to several thousand tickets per game. A source told ESPN the cause was structural. U.S. sanctions prevent FIFA's American-based entities from processing any ticket transactions involving Iranian residents. FIFA's public statement promised it was working closely with the Iran Federation to identify compliance solutions. But promises had already been made and broken once. FIFA President Infantino and Secretary General Matthias Grasfrom had personally met with Iranian officials in Turkey weeks earlier, promising logistical support face-to-face. Those promises did not prevent the ticket revocation. And it's not just logistics. Iran forward Mehdi Taremi told reporters directly that U.S. visa denials and a separate case of a Somali referee blocked from entering the country were damaging the country's image and creating a lot of tension around the World Cup. Sport Bible. Think about what that means. A professional athlete, mid-tournament, is publicly connecting his own team's treatment to a completely separate referee controversy because they both stem from the same source, a host government's immigration enforcement colliding with FIFA's tournament operations. Iran is competing in their 7th World Cup, without their federation's full leadership present, without home comforts, without their own fans in the stands, sleeping in one country, playing in another. That's not a footnote. That's a team functioning as a protest simply by showing up and playing. While Iran's federation was fighting visa battles and ticket allocations, a different kind of resistance was building, this one from players across multiple nations, united by a single demand: heat. Specifically, how FIFA defines player welfare when welfare and broadcast revenue happen to intersect. FIFA's solution to playing a 48-team tournament across some of the hottest stadiums in North America during summer was a mandatory 3-minute cooling break in the 22nd minute of each half for every match. FIFA framed this explicitly as a player welfare measure, but that same 3-minute window is also structurally a commercial break available for broadcasters to sell advertising during. Before the tournament began, dozens of players signed an open letter to FIFA. Their demand? 6-minute breaks instead of 3, independently verified science-based temperature threshold instead of a fixed schedule, real welfare standards instead of a number that happens to align neatly with commercial broadcast windows. FIFA's response? The 3-minute format stayed exactly as it was. The commercial window stayed intact. The players who signed that open letter are now competing under the exact system they publicly objected to, because the only alternative to playing under FIFA's rules is not playing at all. That's not resignation. That's documented on-the-record objection from the very athletes FIFA claims to be protecting, followed by zero structural change. Now to the controversy that broke just hours before this script was finalized, because it shows exactly how FIFA handles scrutiny when the institution itself is the one under the microscope. June 14th, Germany versus Curaçao. As the broadcast cut to the video review team working out of FIFA's broadcast center in Dallas, Australian VAR official Sean Evans was seen making a hand gesture, an OK symbol, thumb and forefinger touching in a circle, other fingers extended. That specific gesture has been associated with white supremacy since 2019, when it was designated a hate symbol by the Anti-Defamation League. It gained global notoriety after the Christchurch mosque shooter displayed it during his court appearance. This wasn't a fringe accusation. Fair Network, described by reporting as a longtime partner of both FIFA and UEFA, specifically tasked with monitoring racist and discriminatory symbols at international matches, issued a direct statement. Advice from our experts is that the gesture used clearly resembles an upside-down OK hand symbol, used as a white power symbol in global far-right circles. Fair called the gesture neo-Nazi and stated plainly, clearly, this official should have no further role to play in this World Cup. This is FIFA's own designated discrimination watchdog, calling for the removal of a FIFA-selected tournament official within 24 hours of the World Cup beginning. FIFA's response came fast, but not in the direction Fair had demanded. Evans stated the gesture was not intentional and was not meant to communicate a message, affiliation, game, or belief of any kind. He elaborated, "The only explanation I can offer is that the movement was an involuntary, subconscious twitch, and I was unaware I had done it at the time." Within roughly 24 hours, FIFA's Independent Disciplinary Committee announced it had found no breaches of the FIFA disciplinary code. Evans stayed on the tournament's roster of 30 video review analysts working across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Here's the detail that should make you pause. In every match before this incident, VAR officials had stood facing the broadcast camera during the Meet the Team segment. In every match after it, the camera angle changed. VAR teams were shown facing their screens instead, no longer toward the camera. FIFA has not explained why that change was made. FIFA didn't publicly acknowledge altering anything, but the broadcast format quietly changed immediately after the incident that made the previous format a liability. That's not transparency, that's damage control, executed silently while the public statement insisted nothing required action at all. Look at what we just walked through. 5 completely different situations, 5 different countries, 5 different mechanisms of friction. A Brazilian superstar refusing a contractual media obligation and accepting the financial penalty. A tiny island nation exposing the uneven physical toll of FIFA's own expansion plan. A team forced to live in a different country than the one they're competing in after losing both their officials' visas and their fans' tickets. Dozens of athletes formally objecting to a welfare policy that doubles as a commercial product, and a discrimination watchdog publicly demanding action that FIFA's own disciplinary body declined to take, followed by a quiet camera angle change with no explanation offered. None of these are coordinated. None of these players or federations contacted each other to plan a unified protest. That's what makes this pattern significant rather than coincidental. 5 separate, independent points of friction, all surfacing in the same 5-day window, all pointing at the same institution, all exposing the same gap. The distance between what FIFA promises, unity, welfare, inclusion, zero tolerance for discrimination, and what FIFA actually delivers when those promises cost money, control, or public embarrassment. Every World Cup has controversy. That's not new. Qatar 2022 faced sustained criticism over labor conditions and human rights, debated for years before a ball was kicked. What's different here isn't the existence of controversy, it's the speed and the source. Qatar's controversies were largely about the host nation's domestic conditions, debated externally mostly before the tournament started. What's happening in 2026 is coming from inside the competition itself, from the participants, players, federations, FIFA's own discrimination monitor, and it's arriving in real time, match by match in the tournament's very first week. This is also the first World Cup with 3 host nations, 48 teams, and a tournament footprint spanning an entire continent's worth of geography and climate. FIFA built a bigger, more complex machine than any previous edition, and in Week 1, that machine is generating friction at a rate no single previous World Cup produced this early. So what does this actually mean for the next 5 weeks of this tournament? For players, Vinicius Jr.'s calculated defiance and the Heat protocol letter before it both demonstrate something significant. Players are increasingly willing to treat FIFA's commercial obligations as negotiable, even at direct financial cost to themselves. That's a shift in leverage that didn't exist as visibly in previous tournaments. For smaller federations, Cape Verde's result and the broader travel logistics imbalance behind it raise a structural question FIFA will have to answer eventually: whether the 48-team expansion actually serves the smaller nations it was marketed around, or whether it simply gives them a bigger stage to absorb a bigger physical burden. For Iran and any future team caught between FIFA's tournament and their home country's geopolitical relationship with a host nation, this is now a documented precedent. Visa denials, revoked ticket allocations, promises made in person by FIFA's own leadership that didn't survive contact with sanctions law. Future federations in politically sensitive positions now have a real case study in exactly how little protection FIFA's promises actually provide. For FIFA's discrimination policy, the Sean Evans case sets a clear bar. A FIFA-aligned discrimination watchdog can publicly demand removal in writing using the word neo-Nazi, and FIFA's own disciplinary body can clear the official within roughly a day, while the broadcast quietly adjusts its camera angles without comment. That's the actual standard, demonstrated in real time, not in FIFA's public messaging about it. And for FIFA as an institution, 5 distinct fires in 5 days suggest an organization that built a tournament bigger and more commercially ambitious than its current capacity to manage trust, transparency, and consistency across 48 nations and 3 host countries. A goalless draw that exposed a structural inequality, a superstar who decided a fine was cheaper than compliance, a team sleeping across a border because of a war and a visa system that wouldn't bend, dozens of players who signed their names to an objection that changed nothing, and a discrimination monitor's public demand that FIFA answered with a same-day clearance and a silent camera change. 5 different stories, 1 pattern. So here's the question worth sitting with. When this many separate signs of friction surface in a single week from this many different directions, is this still normal World Cup drama? Or is it the first real evidence that FIFA built a tournament too big, too commercially driven, and too politically exposed to actually deliver on what it promised? Let us know what you think in the comments, and which of these 5 stories you think FIFA will be forced to address next.